Hey and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. In this video I'd like to go over how to Paladin heal the Tower of the Mad Mage in Mod 19. With the release of Mod 19 came a whole variety of different changes to the Paladin Healer, and many of you may be experiencing, as myself included, was the lack of potency on our heals. In this video I'll essentially go over how to basically cope with this, what powers to use and when. So let's jump straight into it. So to start things off, I'd like to make a few things very clear to you. When you first begin and you queue up, you will be paired with another healer, at least normally. It will either be a cleric or a warlock, and they are essentially there to support you in healing your allies. They will be there to make sure that your allies are full HP, and you're there to essentially give them that little layer of protection of those blue shields. You are also there to help spam heals, basically to get them to full HP nice and quickly if they're at a lower state. The other healer is just there to back you up and heal them over time when they don't necessarily need the heal right then and there. They will also primarily concentrate on healing the tanks, and you can do so as kind of a secondary thing. However, in the phase 3 of Tower of the Mad Mage, your positioning as both the healers is key. If you do not position yourselves correctly with the disintegration waves and the double hypothermias, you will nuke the whole party. This is key to get right as a healer. If you do not get it right, you'll end up just needlessly killing people. I recommend when you first group up, contact your healer you're paired with. Designate who will go where during the disintegration waves with the double hypothermia. Ideally what you do, the Paladin Healer, as soon as the boss disappears, looks for him, finds him, and moves immediately away, while the other healer stays in the middle. Then, if Alistair holds up both hands, you need to choose to either move left or right. This will already be predetermined, and you tell your other healer which way you're going to go, left or right. Generally I just go right, and the other healer goes left. And if it's just simply Alistair holds up his left hand, then everybody moves to the right, and you're now far away, and the other healer who's in the middle will go close to the boss, but to the right, so he's not in the disintegrate. If you look at the platform here, you can see the patterns. You can see where these two curves they cross. This is exactly where you can stand for your ideal situation, where you won't overlap the hypothermias whatsoever. If you're on that X, you are safe. The disintegration wave won't kill you, and it won't kill your party either, as long as they're close enough to you. On the mention of the hypothermia in itself, make damn sure that you have your critical avoidance capped on your healer. No matter which healer you are, make sure it's capped. For a paladin, we need 95,000. This is because of our feature which gives us 10,000 more critical avoidance when our divinity is full. So when that is empty, you want to make sure you're still capped. The reason for this is if you do not have your critical avoidance capped, there is a chance that the hypothermia targeting you will crit, which means it will hit everybody around you with a crit. And if it hits you with a crit, it will kill everybody. Even as a tank with 1,000,000+ HP, you'll die to that hypothermia if it crits. So make sure you're not the cause of these deaths, just by merely having that critical avoidance capped. So, another thing to coordinate before you start the fight. Are you running with 2 tanks, or are you running with a solo tank? If you're running with 2 tanks, then ideally, as the 2 healers, you each designate a tank to yourself. And that is your tank, and you look after that tank. You place your Hand of Divinity, which is your Paladin mark, upon that designated tank, and you don't switch it to any other target. That is your tank. You keep him alive. The other healer will keep the other tank alive. If you're just running with a solo tank, then a crucial part and a role you have to play is to give that solo tank big shields. You need to use that Hand of Divinity just before he gets smashed by an Annihilate. This is especially important in phase 1 so that he won't die. He will keep receiving those stacks more and more, and the more he has of them, the more damage he will take from that next Annihilate. So it is vital that you give him a biggest shield that you can so that he'll be able to survive. I know sometimes it won't crit, and that can suck. So sometimes you may want to apply the shield a little earlier and then try again if you didn't get a crit. If you don't, oh well, just blame the tank, he sucks if he dies. With regards to powers, I highly recommend to use the daily sanctuary. Save this sanctuary daily every time there is a heat wave. This will be generally when Hallister shouts, "How do you feel about warm weather? Or I'll burn you all to ash." And then he will do the heat wave, which is an intense damage over time effect on everybody. It's rather hard and challenging to heal through it. However, the daily power sanctuary with a 600 magnitude heal will heal them fairly sufficiently, as long as they're not using those minus 25% incoming healing boots. If they are, they may need to use a stone or a healing potion. However, you can generally heal them through it if they have a decent amount of HP. So, again, I highly recommend don't use any other daily but Sanctuary. Save it for those heat waves, which will always occur at the beginning of the fire elemental phase. However, you may get double or triple elemental phases where you'll have that heat wave throughout. Just keep aware of it. It's always when he does that call out. It's always pretty much the same one. Just position yourselves correctly in an ideal spot behind the boss, and everybody should group on you for those heals. The other healer should help you out with their own heal over time effects. Just keep in mind this power is a channel ability. You will have to just press the power once and then stand there for the duration of the channeling until the heat wave's over, and then you can just cancel it and continue about your way. I highly recommend doing this and using this daily because it will save you that divinity. You won't have to use any divinity for this healing. It's essentially like free heals. If you do so end up not having your daily, you can, yes, spam your heals on that divine shelter, waste all that divinity, but you may be struggling then after to heal anybody else. At times when you cannot hit the boss to gain action points or heal, I highly recommend just holding up your shield. Whenever you're at a time where the boss is not on the platform and you're just standing there, hold up your shield and you'll regain action points. And that way you can guarantee you'll have that daily for when you need it. For your build and what you like to use, it's entirely up to you. I use what works for me and it seems to do alright. I generally like to use my Divine Shelter as my AoE heal, with then my Sacred Weapon and Circle of Divinity just to regain that divinity regen. Along with that, I'm using my Cure Wounds at will just to help out healing the tank every now and again, or some extra player who's low on HP. I also then like to use my Valorous Strike just so I can actually do something while, essentially not healing. Just hit the boss and do a little bit of damage. As for what build I'm actually using, it's essentially the build I posted a while back. You should be able to find it in the link in the description. So now I'll go through the different phases, what kind of to look out for and what you should be really doing. So to begin with, in phase 1, it's your job to just help keep that tank alive. If you've got a solo tank, make sure you have your Mark of Divinity on him and use your Hand of Divinity every time before he's going to get smashed by another Annihilate. Not so important at the very beginning of the fight, but after he's taken like 3 or 4 stacks, make sure you give him a decent sized shield. One thing I'd like to mention just before we get into things. I highly recommend you familiarize yourselves with the mechanics by reading through the Tower of the Mad Mage guide by Lightbringer, Sharpedge and Viral. They did an awesome job there, and it is hosted on Jane's website. Link should be in the description. So when the boss hits 80%, he will start his first phase. This will be one of 3. Either his fire, ice or lightning phase. If you have fire, you will get your heat wave initially. Make sure to have that sanctuary ready. If you have superstorm, you need to make sure that everybody has a nice critical shield. You can generally just use your divine shelter 1, 2 or even 3 times and you should be able to get a critical touch procced. So just make sure they have a full shield there. If you have a legendary mount like the Griffin, ideally use it. If you're using an artifact like the Sigil of the Paladin, ideally use it so they can gain that extra survivability so that can actually survive that massive hit from the Superstorm. If you get ice, it's fairly simple. Just make sure everybody's full HP, gather the ice all together and hide behind it. There's a high chance you as the healer will actually get stuck in the ice. so make sure you're behind the boss in a reasonable location where everybody else can easily get behind you. The next phase will occur when the boss hits 60%, and the next one will occur when the boss hits 40%. It will always be one of the 3 phases. If you've already had that phase, it won't occur again. Then you'll go on to phase 2, where all you can really do is just hit the hand as best you can. Nobody will need any healing. Then on to phase 3. It's much more complex. Initially, you will get one of the 3 elemental phases, like phase 1. You'll go through that first elemental phase, then you'll get your first disintegration wave. This will be either combined with cloud to ground with lightning, your hypothermia, you'll only get one of them this time during the ice, or your chains during your fire element. All of these are fairly straightforward. Just make sure if you're the one who gets the hypothermia that you move accordingly and you don't end up nuking your allies by leading them into the disintegration wave. The aforementioned single element phases will occur at 100% HP, then another at 90%, then another at 80%. Once he hits 70% HP, he will start his dual elemental phase. This phase you'll recognize when he states, "That was just a warm-up." And then he will go into his dual elemental phase, which will be a combination of the 3 elemental phases. These phases are a little bit more interesting, especially when you have 2 different types of mechanics stacked on top of each other. However, as the healer, just make sure everybody's full HP and do your best to keep the tanks alive. As I mentioned in the previous single phases, it'll be the same with when you get your superstorm, your ice, or your heat wave, using that sanctuary on that heat wave. However, during your dual phases, if you get a phase which involves cold, this being the ice, you will get at the end, as soon as he teleports off the platform, you will get your disintegration wave with your double hypothermia. So you want to make sure you move accordingly and calculated with your partner healer to make sure you move that hypothermia to your coordinated location and that you won't nuke anyone. Ideally here you are moving with your tank and maybe 1 or 2 other DPS, and the rest are with the other healer. So that's essentially it for the dual elemental phases. However, again, the thresholds for these are you'll get the first dual elemental phase at 70%, the second one at 55%, and the next one at 40%. Then you go finally onto the last end part of the trial at 25%. So at 25% he will enter the all elemental phase, where he will use rotations combining all of the 3 elemental powers. The phase will begin with a whirlwind spawning in the middle and 2 fireballs, 1 north and 1 south. As well as that, you will also spawn 2 hypothermias, 1 on each healer, so one of them will be on you. You need to move accordingly with your designated DPS to the opposite side of the other healer, either east or west. However, if you have enough HP, you can go north or south, depending on which fireballs the tanks take, and go with one of the tanks with that fireball. Don't take the fireball, but share the hypothermia with the tank after he's taken the fireball. Make sure to give him a quick heal if he needs it. If you're with a solo tank, generally that solo tank will take both the fireballs. He will take the first fireball before the whirlwind, then run all the way to the opposite side of the whirlwind, and that's where you can be standing with him. He'll take the fireball as he gets pushed into it, and you get pushed right beside it. It's kind of an art skill to do that. It can be a bit tricky to begin with, but it's manageable, and you should be able to tank that hypothermia with just the tank alone. However, if you don't have enough HP, I don't really recommend this. At least have 500k HP. And then it goes into a whole mess of disintegrates and elemental mechanics. First up, the boss will appear in the middle. There will also be a boss in the sky, which is predicting a disintegration wave. You need to move accordingly to the right side, and there will also be a superstorm. So you need to make sure you heal everybody, make sure they're full HP for that superstorm. Then, as soon as the superstorm is burst and the disintegrate has gone off, you need to again look for the next boss who's in the sky. Alistair will himself remain in the middle, DPS will be able to hurt him. However, you need to move. You need to move for that disintegrate. And then there will be a heat wave. You need to move for that heat wave, move to the designated area. That's when you need to put up your sanctuary. You need to put up your sanctuary ideally in a spot where the disintegrate after that won't hit that same spot. Generally, if you look over here, it's to the left. It'll be to the left on this X mark, exactly where I'm putting it up. You can generally just stay in this spot as long as it's near the edge of disintegrate on that X where the curves cross. This is where you put up your sanctuary. The heat wave will go off and then you'll have ice. Everybody stays there, or you move accordingly if you aren't in the right spot, and you all hide behind the ice. And then the ice will go off and you'll get a whole mess of mechanics there, including your fire ring, your cloud to ground, your charges. You'll also get your hypothermia, and you get a whole mess of things. Anyway, as soon as you get him down to 10%, he will disappear off the platform and you'll have 2 Halisters in the sky, predicting 2 disintegration waves. You need to move accordingly so that you're in that single sliver of a safe spot. Again, it will be on top of one of the X's. And just after that, you'll get a hypothermia where you move to the side and the DPS can move to the left while you move to the right with the tank and the other healer. And then after that at 10%, it's just your final Sunfall where it's just a DPS check. This one, ideally you have your sanctuary for it. However, you may be hard pressed to actually have it for this. So ideally have your full divinity so you can spam those divine shelters when you need. It's a bit tough now with the change to the heals, but it's still doable. The more DPS you have it in the run, the easier the whole run will actually go. And there you have it. That's my Mod 19 Paladin Healer guide for Tower of the Mad Mage. Hopefully this is helpful to some of you out there and maybe you learned a thing or two. What mainly makes us unique compared to the other healers is our ability to have burst heals with our divine shelter in a massive area. So we are not dead yet, at least as a healer. I know shielding as it was before is gone, and RIP that. But we gotta move on, and we have been reduced now to a mere healer instead of the god we were before. Anyway, hopefully this was enjoyable and I presented it well. If I did, consider leaving the video a like. If you're new around here, consider subscribing. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye for now.